Greetings. So there was a board game geek thread about Magic Realm. It's called "A Warning to Potential P&Pers," and largely the guy's saying, "Hey, um, read the darn book, play the game before you do a print and play, because this thing is massive. It's going to be a lot of work to print and play, and ultimately the game might not be for you." And so that went into this course back and forth because if you go onto the Magic Realm board and say bad things about Magic Realm, you're going to have a bit of pushback because the folks there love the game, and rightfully so. So I do encourage you to go to Board Game Geek and look at the thread yourself. But what that did is that got me thinking a little bit, because that prompted a discussion not only on the board, which I only took part a little bit in, tiny bit, really tiny, and a disc on the I think the Dragons Down Discord, actually, in the off-topic thread, just about you know combat, because that was one of the things that got brought up, was combat, right? And it just got me thinking about various things about our favorite board game here, and because I have other videos that I'm trying to actually make that actually take work, this one got pushed up to the top because it's easy and I can just sit here and rant and ramble. Done. So laziness wins. But check out the thread in any case. Let's talk. This is a little bit of a rambler, all over the place. So bear with me if you would, and we'll get there. I mean, one thing, and this is sort of the first thing, and this is almost just as much a caveat as anything, or a rant at the internet, one or the other. I don't know. But one of the things, I think the discussion on that thread, I would say, got heated at the end. It obviously got into that back and forth that you see on an internet forum where you're like, well, this is going nowhere. And, right? And again, I wasn't involved because I'm old, and I did that in 2000, where I would gripe on a forum, and it just it's sort of not worth it. And but that's cool. Everybody, but I think the thing to keep in mind, in my mind, is it's okay. I'm going to put these opposite. It's okay to dislike parts of your favorite things. In this case, Magic Realm. I bitch about the victory conditions in Magic Realm all day. I compared it to Talisman, for Christ's sake. I mean, if that's not the most awful insult you could give a part of a game, I don't know what it is. But it's okay to dislike parts of your favorite game. It's okay to go, I don't like the victory conditions, or I think the combat sucks in this game, or whatever. And that is okay, I think. On the other hand, I think one of the things that the internet has done to us is it's made us all armchair critics, right? You can't just sit back and consume a thing and enjoy parts of it and not enjoy parts of it. There's this weird compulsion, I think, to critique it, and to have that critique somehow jive with objective truth, if that makes any sense. And don't get me wrong, I am literally a perpetrator of that as well. I make videos on YouTube talking about games and movies. I might be that guy. But obviously these are games, these are preferences. Everybody has different preferences, and it is absolutely okay to look at something and go, I think that's objectively good, and I don't like it, as opposed to saying, well, I don't like it, and thus that must be objectively bad, which I do think happens in some of these threads. I think the correct answer is, I think that is pretty good stuff, which I don't subjectively like. Sorry, got tongue-tied there. As a for instance, so as a for instance, I always gripe about the Magic Realm victory rules. I think objectively they're fine, and they certainly make sense at the time when the game was created. I think they're not good. I think the game largely is not helped by them. and let down a little bit by them. But a lot of people think I'm full of crap, and rightfully so. Um, and rightfully so. They don't mind the rules. They think they think they're fine. They've played with them 1,000 times, and so on. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's something to keep in mind when we talk about this, because we're going to talk. We're not going to talk about the victory conditions. I have talked about those forever. We're going to talk about combat a little bit though. And so I think my contention is that Magic Realm combat is objectively amazing. Um, you take that combat system, and that combat system takes into account weapon length and weapon speed, and character speed, and character strength, and fatiguing, and spells cast in combat. I can have hirelings. The enemy can have hirelings if we're PvPing. I can do PvP. I can do PvE. I can have 6 dudes on one monster. I can have 6 monsters on me. I can do a 6-on-6. Like the way that everything is handled in terms of from everything from an initiative system to differences in weapons to subtle differences in characters. By the way, the entire combat system runs off of either a couple stats on a monster chip, which has 2 sides, so 2 sets of stats, or 12 chits on a character's board that are then played. And when you get wounded, those chits go away. As you fatigue, those chits go away and out of play. And so you're really talking about a really amazing combat system that in a couple rolls can tell you so much about a given round of combat. Oh, well, you went first because your weapon was longer in this case, but since you weren't fast enough or lucky enough, you didn't hit the dragon. In the meantime, the dragon came back and smacked you with a claw, and that claw did enough damage to destroy your shield and wound you. And so now you're losing one of your you're losing the ability to attack at your highest strength with little fatigue. Right? I mean, that's pretty cool. And if you look at, say, a role-playing game system, that might take 16 rolls or something to get all of that info. I rolled initiative. He rolled initiative. I rolled to hit, or he rolled defense, or both, given the game. Right? Oh, he hit you for how much damage? You missed him. He hit you. Right? In a Magic Realm, a round of combat, you line dudes up, you roll essentially, 2 sets of dice, and you have all that information, and you're done, and then you get that and move on to the next round. It's actually very objectively amazing. And I'm going to say take umbrage, because I just said I wasn't going to, because it's all these dudes' right to go, well, this combat sucks. That's their right, but objectively, the things that it packs into a single round of combat, in not an abstracted way, too, because it's not that you are just abstracting all that into a single roll, because that's sort of like, that's the talisman. You go, well, you could just abstract that all, roll, and look off a combat results table. Okay, fine. You could just roll a d6, and if you roll higher than the monster's prowess, you win, right? I mean, you could do all that stuff. This doesn't. This literally, every weapon matters, every chit matters, and where you play it and how you play it, and whether the shield or, and so on. Do you have armor? Do you not have armor? Etc. All of that absolutely matters. And I have to say, it is objectively an amazing combat system. Sort of genius. So I do think it's objectively amazing. And I do, while I understand maybe that guy doesn't like it, I think we have to at least hopefully sit on the ground that that's a damn cool system. But let's be clear, and this is the problem, and I think this is the wall that a lot of people hit with Magic Realm. Magic Realm combat, 90+% of them. Let's keep this in mind. And certainly 90+%, I mean, even if I'm wrong, I would argue that 90+% of the combats that a beginner is going to get into are also objectively boring. Because ultimately in Magic Realm, it comes down to, can you undercut the enemy's speed? And if you can undercut them, you will hit them. Otherwise, you have a 1/3 chance to hit them. Done. That's it. That's the whole game. Now, I said it matters, all that stuff, and all that stuff does matter, but in a lot of fights, it just boils down to, can I undercut that dude and do enough damage to kill him? Yes or no? If yes, I do that. If no, I have a 1/3 chance to hit him if I can do enough damage to kill him. If you can't do enough damage to kill him, you should have run already. By the way, it also handles fleeing, the combat system, and that comes down to, can I play a chip lower than his move? Yes or no? Done. So, again, it's okay to like a game or love a game, because I love Magic Realm, and yet admit, you know what, combat objectively is not going to do it for the vast majority of people that sort of run into this game. And there's reasons for that. And I've said Magic Realm lies to you. Magic Realm looks like it's a combat game. Like, it looks like the tactical combat is the point, because there's a big section on it. It has all these variables. It's very fiddly. And it's neat looking, right? When you look at it and you're 9 and you look at, oh my God, I can dodge, I can thrust, I can duck. Oh my God, and the armor goes on there, and then you line it up. Chef's kiss. But ultimately, the vast majority of combats are boring, and even the combats that are complicated, because there's multiple dudes, largely come down to, can I find a way to get my dude on that dude's sheet where I can play something that undercuts him and thus is going to hit him, or play something where he can't undercut me. Thus, for him to hit me, I'm going to have to be able to hit him, and I get to hit him first. And we're not going to go into the exact, I mean, if you're watching this, you probably know the game sort of already, so we're not going to go into specifically why that is, or there's lots of videos on the internet about how to play Magic Realm. But the fact of the matter is that even the big old 6-on-6s or 10-on, right? I've done a lot of Magic Realm combats on this channel even, and some of them have been pretty darn big, and largely they still all come down to about the same thing. When I'm doing them, I'm flipping the chits over going, what side do I play my guys on so that they can do the right thing, undercut the enemy or not be undercut, and so on. So I think it's okay for both these things to exist. It's okay for Magic Realm combat to be awesome, right? So I can say Magic Realm combat is objectively awesome. Let's say amazing. I like that better. And Magic Realm combat is boring most of the time. It just absolutely is. That is the truth of it, and it's okay. And you might say, well, if it's boring, it has to be bad. I don't think that's true. And I think that's where we sort of miss. And that's where I say Magic Realm fools you into thinking it's a combat game. The fact of the matter is, Magic Realm is not a combat game. It is a pathing, planning, I'm going to say logistics game, because it's not a logistics game. It is a planning game, right? And the goal is that you are using your limited days, because you have a month, most games, and limited phases, 4 phases a day. So you could do math. I'm not going to do math, because you don't do math on a video if you can help it. Because you're going to be wrong. I'm doing math in my head right now. Jesus. So it's 80 plus 32, 112 phases. So typically you have 112 phases. And that's it. Your goal is to use those phases to get your victory points. Done. That's the game. Battle is simply one piece of that you're trying to navigate, either to earn you victory points or to avoid dying while you're trying to get your victory points. Done. And the things you can kill, you can farm them for victory, and things you can run away from, you can avoid, etc. It's just part of a thing, and that's actually one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which I did think was interesting-ish. And so the thing that should you got to think about is that in the context of the larger game, those combat rules and the much maligned victory rules that I gripe about make a ton of sense. The combat rules are meant like so. Imagine, I mean, you could easily imagine taking those characters and moving them to a hex board. I've imagined it a million times. I've had dreams about this game where you took Magic Realm and you moved these guys out onto a combat board and you played out a mini RPG combat. That would be awesome and awful all at the same time. It would be awesome because it would be sort of fun, right? To take the White Knight, those characters, and then the goblins and move them around and do that. Except it would be a nightmare and it would take forever and the rules would have to be 100 more pages or something and it would be a mess and games would never be done. I could never play that, on stream in less than 20 hours or whatever a month. Where, and so in context, those rules make a ton of sense. I think about the victory rules. And there's times when there are times when you think of those rules and you go, man, I don't like those rules. They really let the game down. And then you go, but what would you have done differently if you were the game designer at the time? And the answer is nothing. Now, I have made a little mini expansion for myself to play on channel that changes the victory rules. And I love it. And I wouldn't play without it. And I have it at home. I actually, here you go. And along with a thing of packing tape for some reason. I've made all the cards, right? So we play with a bunch of cards. It's largely questing the realm. It's not genius. It's just questing the realm, but with my own cards and less all play sort of things. Because if you've ever played Realm Speak and Done questing the realm, that's it. And there's a lot of quests and there's events, and I keep them in this goofy. I don't know what this was originally, and then that's how we play. But here's the thing. So go back to 1979. I was 9 when I got Magic Realm, and it was a beautiful box, by the way. And that box was heavy, as it is. There was a lot of cardboard in that box. There's 20 tiles. There was several sheets, I forget, of counters that you had to punch, and cards, little mini cards that you had to punch. There was a ton of that crap in there. Every item was on a counter. Every spell was on a card. Every treasure was on a card. Imagine putting a deck of 200 extra cards in there and an extra set of rules and then some explanations because, you had to then explain the quests and so on the card. You cannot... That game barely shipped, I think, as it is, due to the amount of crap which was in that game. There was no possible way that the game designer was going to stuff an extra rule set in there to do to make me happy with the victory conditions and quest cards and extra chits, because a lot of these quests also then cheat and use more goblins than exist in the game. So you would have had to have printed probably one more sheet of counters to cover all the things in here. Same thing with something like spells, and you go, well, man, this game, I don't love the spells that come in the base game. I don't hate them, but I go, man, I wish the characters had more options. And you go, yeah, but if you add more options, this game would have never shipped. So in the context of, and it's funny because I do think, as a software developer, I do think I have a similar experience. I'm going to put that in ironic air quotes. I have a similar experience in the sense that the people that use my work experience my work differently than I experienced it. And I think that's anything where you're producing something that someone then consumes. In that they don't understand the context in which it was made. And now that's okay. I don't think you have to understand the context which it's made to go, hey, that doesn't work for me, or hey, that's bad. But oftentimes when someone comes back and goes, well, why doesn't your software do this? You go, well, we could have done that, but the cost to buy that data was $100,000 a month, and that, and so on, right? They don't understand. They just look and see, oh, that feature's not there. So I look and I gripe about the victory conditions, or these guys gripe about the combat. Um, and you go, well, wait a minute. In context, so the victory conditions, let's use that as an example. In the context of trying to fit the game in the box and get this game shipped, a victory condition, right, that takes up this amount of space in the rule book and is fairly simple and has a very wargamey feel because, right, makes a lot of sense. The combats, in the context of a game that hopefully you can play in an afternoon, where multiple people, you have up to 16 players playing and they might each have a combat. And so I don't want all this extra space on the table to do combats. The nice thing about combat in Magic Realm is player pulls their sheet out, they can play it in front of them, they can do their own combat, and someone just either watches over their shoulder or you don't. You just can do that all in parallel. You're not supposed to, because sometimes what you do might impact something someone else does, and so on. That handles all those situations in really a matter of a couple minutes and can handle the woods girl and the woods folk and the druid attacking the white knight and the pilgrim with, and happens to be an octopus in the clearing who's attacking all of them. That's amazing. Almost no other game does that. I would argue that no other board game does those kinds of things. And I could be wrong because my board game view is limited. But in context, whether you like the combat system or not, or whether you like the victory conditions or not, the rules make a ton of sense. And the answer of what as a designer would do differently is, you would have done nothing differently except made it worse because you probably weren't as smart as Hamlin. That's right. Yeah. So there you go. And this is a total aside, right? This has very little to do with. I think there was a couple comments in that thread which made me think of this. A couple comments were like, "Well, if Magic Realm is so great, why has it never come up again?" Kind of what, right? Why is it, no one uses that combat system, right? Or no one uses that mechanic and so on. And so be it. And I thought, and I don't really actually, I'm not even going to address that per se, but I do think it's funny because like Magic Realm came out, I was 9 when Magic Realm came out in 1979. And I wasn't super aware of a larger board game or tabletop role-playing hobby. I was aware of Toys R Us had Magic Realm, and I was super into all that crap, and so I got it. But Magic Realm was, I feel, doomed to fail a little bit. I think that no matter what the game did, it was not going to do well, and it just came at an awkward time. In some ways, it was Avalon Hill's answer to the D&D craze, which was actually ramping up quite a bit at this era. People were leaving wargaming, and tabletop role playing was becoming wildly popular and sort of getting into the gestalt of the popular gestalt, right? Not like it is today. Today's totally different. It's a different era, but like the news, oh, a new game is sweeping the nation, and and is it harming your kids, right? They still did that back in the 70s. Right? It was becoming a thing, whereas wargaming was becoming less of a thing. Like it had its heyday, I'm gonna say a decade before, but the decade before, for sure. And I think Magic Realm was Avalon Hill's concept of, hey, let's let's compete with that. Obviously, this fantasy thing is gathering steam. Let's let's hook on that train and see where it takes us. And Magic Realm was indeed a genius game. It was absolutely ahead of its time, and to some degree, I would argue, still is. If you can be ahead of your time 45 years later, I think Magic Realm still weirdly is ahead of its time in some ways. And I understand that it has antiquated mechanics, and I get it. It's not for modern audiences or whatever the frick that means. I totally understand all of that. But I do think it was ahead of its time, and I think it was doomed to fail. So why is that? I think probably because it hit a market that didn't exist. Um, that market was obviously 9-year-olds who, no, that it was shooting for that market of. So how to put this? So effectively, Magic Realm is war game mechanics, but not with a D&D theme, not with a fantasy theme, because that would be something like War of the Rings, or I don't know, what are some of those games? Barbarian Kings, right? That was one. Was Wizard Kings? That was a sort of a Risk, but with wizards, like those games, right? There's those war games which are fantasy war games, war game mechanics with a D&D theme. But more to the point, this is war game mechanics with a D&D concept. So when you say, "Well, am I the general leading an army of dwarves against an army of orcs?" No, you are the dwarf going on adventures like a dwarf in D&D goes on adventures. But we're going to do it with wargame mechanics. And we're going to abstract it and do a whole month. And that's the game. And so the question is, who are you capturing with that game? The people that the people that are into war game mechanics were probably also into war games. You're not capturing a lot of the old grognards who were interested in, well, how did logistics affect the Battle of the Bulge? Don't know, don't care, right? Should Lincoln have gotten rid of McClellan earlier? Whatever. Like, those guys weren't coming over. Because those guys, no, they might have been interested in, in a war game theme like that, but you didn't have a lot of those guys interested in playing a epic fantasy adventure game. And the people that were interested in playing epic fantasy adventure games were moving to D&D or playing D&D and didn't even know Magic Realm existed, and certainly weren't going to accidentally stumble into it like I did, kind of. And so I think you really just hit this cross-section of the population that didn't exist. I love wargaming mechanics, and I am super interested in epic fantasy adventure games, and I'm not yet playing D&D or haven't already found my game, which is probably at the time D&D. There was nothing in that middle circle. There was nothing in that Venn diagram. Or very, very little. And those that were, me and most of you, got there probably by accident in 1979. If you did get the game in 1979. Now, there's any number of reasons why you'd stumble on the game in the 45 years hence, and any number of reasons to love the game, and so on. I mean, again, it is a great game, objectively, probably one of the absolutely best board games ever created but no one was going to play this game, and so it was doomed to fail. So yeah, it was sort of a mess in that sense. Which is why, unfortunately, there weren't expansions for it. There was a couple of general articles right afterward, and but the game did not gain traction ultimately, and then flew off into obscurity, really, and most of our shelves for however many years. But I don't think, but I obviously there's a parallel universe where, um, no, there probably isn't. And this game was created, again, this game was created. I believe there was a lot of pressure to create a response to D&D, and this was handed over. That was the assignment, and that's this is what ended up. And it's great that it ended up like this, but I don't think it did anything for Avalon Hill at the time, really. Has Magic Realm been surpassed by newer games, more modern games? Is it has it been somehow surpassed by the narrative wonderfulness of Skyrim or Runebound or Mage Knight? I mean, again, that's going to be obviously an amazingly subjective answer. And my answer is no, I don't think so. I don't think that any game captures the feel of that epic fantasy adventure as well as Magic Realm does for a board game. Now, obviously, if I'm going to play, so for instance, I don't play, so because I think the epic fantasy adventure game is different than the dungeon crawler. So I've played Gloomhaven and I played Descent and right and I played Hero Quest and all those, and those are dungeon crawlers, totally different epic genre. And if I'm playing, I will net. And if I play one of those, I always say, well, why aren't I just playing D&D? Because D&D is going to get me more bang for my buck. Or whatever fantasy role-playing game that gets you the most bang for your buck. That's not the same with Magic Realm. Magic Realm is a different genre and sort of and it's not comparable to, say, a tabletop role-playing game. It is closer to like an entire tabletop campaign wrapped into one 4-hour session, right? That's sort of its idea. And I do think games like Runebound are comparable, and games like Talisman are comparable, and Mage Knight are comparable to Magic Realm. And I don't feel that most of those games do a very good job. Skyrim, the board game, Return of the Heroes, like those all sort of catch the same vibe, in that they're trying to capture an abstraction of all the adventures of a given character in a given period of time within the span of a board game. And nothing quite does it like Magic Realm. Most of them abstract somewhere in such a way that I find off-putting, that wrecks the feel. Or some of them sort of enforce narratives on the game, which might be fun and like Skyrim, right, with its card system, and you could have branching quests. But the answer is none of those, like, those don't quite work that well. Mage Knight, I've talked about already. I think it's a good game. Objectively, it is a good game. It is objectively one of the best of that genre, but there's something wrong with the card and deck building aspect for me, which I find dull and take me out of the epic fantasy sort of vibe. Whereas in Magic Realm, rolling the dice and hiding and so on don't take me out of that. Mage Knight does. I don't think Magic Realm has been surpassed by newer games. I think some games do some things better. But no game as of yet has hit sort of that perfect. Now, again, let's keep this in mind. I have 40 some years of history with this game. I've known this game longer than my wife. Right? Not my parents, right? My parents, that's it. This is my oldest acquaintance. So obviously it's hard to penetrate that much history. I have put more hours into this game than probably anything else, right? Any other single thing. So let's understand something. It is way harder to penetrate that than just 6 plays of Runebound or that, right? So, I mean, take it for what it's worth that I am saying this, because I am very, very biased. But none of those other games feel right. They all feel like competent games. Skyrim's not a bad game. It's just as when all is said and done, if you put both those games out and I go, well, what are we going to get to the table tonight? Magic Realm beats it every single time. And it's going to be a much more different experience, weirdly enough, than, than a game of Runebound or a game of Skyrim, and so on. And Mage Knight has the different thing. Like I said, Mage Knight might have a lot of things going for it. It has character progression. It has a simple-ish card mechanic, and so on. But I feel like I'm playing a game of bridge, more of a puzzle than an actual adventure. And frankly, to be honest, if you gripe about Magic Realms combat being um not exciting, I don't find. I mean, I think Mage Knight's combat is also very deterministic, and I mean the major thing about Mage Knight's combat isn't how you will fight; it's when you go into a fight, you don't necessarily know what's in there, and that's actually the point at which you go, oh shit, that's going to be a hard fight, or that's going to be right, or I can't do this, or I'm gonna, right. That's when that's the randomizer, is when you flip that thing over and go, oh god, I didn't want to fight this dude. And that's sort of the knowing of the game. I mean, and that's not fun. It certainly isn't more fun than Magic Realms combat, for instance. So I'd say no. I'm just gonna shorten that one and say no. Damn it, no. Okay. So this has gone for 37 minutes. So I think I'm done. So that all came about from that thread. Read the thread. I appreciate your indulging me for 40 minutes, and I will talk to you all later on.